Every evening, a dog came to a train station to wait for a man who was never coming back. He did not know the man was dead, or perhaps, in some way we will never be able to understand, he did know, and he came anyway. Rain, snow, the white heat of a Tokyo summer. For 9 years he returned to the same worn patch of ground beside the same ticket gate at the exact hour the evening train pulled in. And he watched the crowds spill out, and he searched their faces, and he waited. His name was Hachikō, and the quiet, stubborn thing he did at that station turned him, slowly, into the most loved dog who has ever lived. A name a whole country still says softly 100 years later. This is his story. Every word of it is true, and it begins, the way these things always do, with something small and warm and happy. In the winter of 1924, a professor named Hidesaburō Ueno stood on a platform, waiting for a crate. Inside it was a puppy, an Akita, born on a snowbound farm in the far north of Japan, and shipped 20 hours south to the city. The little dog arrived limp and cold and barely breathing. Most men would have given up on him. Ueno sat up with him through the nights and nursed him back one careful week at a time, until the weak thing in the crate had become a broad-chested, cinnamon-coloured dog that followed him from room to room. He called him Hachi, and the two of them built the kind of small, sacred routine that people build with the animals they love. Every morning, Hachikō walked his master down to Shibuya Station and watched him vanish through the gate. And every evening, when the train came home, the dog was already there, ears up, tail going, waiting at the exit to walk the professor back through the streets to their door. The men who worked the station knew them on sight. The professor, and the dog who always came to meet him. They had 16 months together. It was all the time they would ever have. On the 21st of May, 1925, Hidesaburō Ueno went to work and did not come home. He was at the university when a vessel burst in his brain. He was gone within hours. He was 53 years old. No one told the dog. There is no way to tell a dog. That evening, at the usual hour, Hachikō walked down to Shibuya Station. He sat at the exit. The train slid in. The doors opened, and the crowd poured out. Coats and briefcases and tired evening faces, and it broke around the waiting dog, and thinned, and was gone. His master was not among them, so Hachikō went home, and the next evening he came back. And the train came in, and his master was not among them. So he came back the evening after that. They tried to give him a new life. He was sent to relatives across the city, and then to the home of the professor's old gardener. It made no difference at all. Again and again the dog got loose and made the long walk back across Tokyo, past the markets, past the crowds, back to Shibuya Station, back to the gate, back to the hour of the evening train. Understand what he was returning to. Not a grave, not the house they had shared. He went back to the one exact place in all the world where, for 16 months, the person he loved had stepped out of the crowd to meet him, without fail, every single day. Perhaps, in whatever way a dog keeps time, the next train was always the one. Perhaps hope, to a dog, is not a thought at all. Perhaps it is a place, a patch of ground where the miracle once happened, and so might happen again. So he kept the place. Through morning shadows and evening trains and the slow turning of the year. And at first, hurrying home, most people walked straight past the brown dog at the gate without a second glance. Not everyone was kind. In the early years he was shooed and chased and doused with water, treated as the nuisance a stray is meant to be. But he never stopped coming. And a dog who returns to the same spot every evening for years is not a stray. Slowly, the people of Shibuya began to understand what they were looking at. He was not begging. He was not lost. He was keeping a promise no one had asked him to keep. The man who grilled chicken by the station started setting aside a skewer for him. A woman brought water. Commuters who had brushed past him for years now looked for him as they came off the train and felt something tighten in their chests when they found him, still there, still watching the gate. And the years took him the way the years take us all. The bright young Akita went grey around the muzzle. The broad shoulders thinned. One ear, once sharp and upright, folded down and stayed there. His eyes grew pale and clouded. But every evening, when the rails began to hum and the train came sliding in, a stiff old dog rose to his feet and searched the crowd one more time for a face that every soul in that station now knew would never come. For 7 years, this was a small and private grief, shared only by the people who passed through one station. Then, in the autumn of 1932, a former student of the professor's, a man who had made a study of the Akita breed, wrote the dog's story down and published it in one of the great newspapers of Japan. And the country came apart over it. Now they had a name for what he was: Chuken Hachikō, faithful Hachikō. Mothers told their children about him at bedtime. Strangers rode the train to Shibuya only to kneel beside him and rest a hand on his greying head and sit with him a while in the thing that he was doing. Letters and money arrived from every corner of Japan. And in the spring of 1934, they did something almost too tender to bear. On the very spot where he waited, they raised a statue of Hachikō in bronze. And at its unveiling, before the gathered crowd, the guest of honor was the dog himself. Old now, patient as ever, sitting quietly at the foot of his own likeness, beside the gate, waiting for the evening train. He had one winter left. On the morning of the 8th of March, 1935, they found him in a quiet lane a little way from the station. He had lain down in the night, close to his post, and died. He was 11 years old. He had waited for Hidesaburō Ueno for 9 years and 9 months, 6 times longer than he had ever been allowed to live at the man's side. For a long time, a cruel little story trailed after him, that he died with skewers in his belly, killed by the scraps of the very city that fed him. Set it down. It isn't true. When scientists finally examined him, with the instruments of a later age, they found the truth was only sad, not sordid. An old dog, worn out by a cancer and a parasite in his heart. The few chicken skewers in his stomach had never harmed him at all. Even the city's kindness had only ever been kind. Japan mourned him the way you mourn a person. And then they carried part of him across Tokyo to Aoyama Cemetery, and they laid him down beside the professor. 9 years, 9 months, and a whole city of trains too late, Hachikō had finally found the man he was waiting for. And here is the part that breaks people. For nearly 10 years, Hachikō came back to one small patch of ground to wait for a reunion that could never come. And that patch of ground, the Hachikō exit at Shibuya Station, with his statue standing on it, is today the most famous meeting place in Tokyo. perhaps in the world. Every single day, tens of thousands of people say the same few words to the ones they love. Meet me at Hachikō. Think about that. The dog who waited alone for a reunion that never arrived has become the exact place where a whole city comes to be reunited. Lovers find each other there. Old friends, parents, and the children who grew up and moved away. They meet and they laugh and they fall into each other's arms under the calm bronze gaze of a dog who understood more deeply than any of them what it costs to wait for someone to come back. That is why we still tell his story 100 years on. Not because a dog was loyal, because he showed us what loyalty actually is. Not a feeling, a returning, coming back and coming back and coming back to the place where love once was and refusing to believe it will not come again. Hachikō waited his whole life for a single reunion he never got. And somehow, he left behind a place where everyone else always does. If this is the kind of story you want to keep hearing, true and human, and every word of it documented, then subscribe and wait with me. A new file opens every week. This file is closed. I'll see you at the next one.